Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the AWS Public Sector DC Summit. My name is Valeria Phillips, and I'm one of your room hosts. I have a few important announcements to make. One is the emergency exit located to the right and in front of the room. Restrooms located to the left. Please make sure you put all your devices on silent mode. And if you have not done so, please download the event app, the AWS America's Events through the App Store. And please fill out the survey through their application at the end of the session. And now, please welcome to the panel our moderator, Dr. Hope, and our panelists. Thank you.
I think we're all mic'd. I think we are. Test, test. Can you all hear me? I'll use my alto voice until it pops up. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Test, test. How about now? All right, I can sing. No?
Are you on?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm on.
All right, I do not work for Verizon. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shaniqua Hope. I serve as the head of content and research for AWS Educate, one of several education initiatives within AWS. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to share the stage with 4 co-conspirators around innovation. Now, Albert Einstein, actually, a quote that I love from Albert Einstein says, "Imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress and giving birth to evolution." And I'll add to his quote, giving birth to revolution. And so today, I am thrilled to be on the stage with my colleagues here so that we can share more about the types of innovation that each of them are exposing students to today as part of their work at their respective institutions. Now, I am a 20-year educator, started out as a 6th grade classroom teacher, very painful experience, but I've evolved and have had the opportunity to serve as a principal, a district leader, an assistant superintendent for a large district, a local district by the name of Washington, D.C. But ultimately, I turned to the dark side and joined the enterprise sector so that I can have the opportunity to travel the globe to better understand how we can foster innovation in any opportunity of learning. And so really my colleagues today we're going to have a conversation about how we do that and how each of them are doing that in their parts of the world. So to hop into our conversation, I won't banter you or give you too much more banter about myself or about why I'm thrilled about this conversation. What we'll do today, or what we'll do as part of our session, I will introduce each of our panelists. Each of them then will take a few moments to tell you more about the work that they lead every day in their respective institutions, and then we're going to pivot into a discussion or a conversation. And then we'll leave a little bit of time at the end to give you the opportunity to ask questions of my colleagues. Does that make sense? Is that good for you? Mm-hmm. Okay, you're quiet. We'll see. We gotta switch it up. So I'd like to first introduce Jamie Goldstein. Jamie serves as the Director of Strategic Projects and Innovation Grants at the Harvard Institute for Learning and Teaching. Jamie oversees funding opportunities to pilot and scale education innovation across the campus and the university for both faculty, staff, and for students. Jamie began her career, like me, in the classroom. She was a 5th grade educator. More pain, I'm sure we'll hear about that. But had the fortunate opportunity to serve in a wide range of other educational roles over the last 20 years. Some of those roles included VP of Curriculum for a startup, Chief of Staff for a music conservatory, and Director of Admissions and Outreach for a private school. Most recently, before joining Harvard, Jamie founded and scaled a lab at MIT and helped engineers to learn to communicate more effectively. Fantastic. So excited for that conversation. I'm next joined beside Jamie is Jennifer Bayuk. Jennifer is an information security management and information technology technologist, due diligence expert. Wow, that's a mouthful. She's held a variety of roles, including Global Financial Services Technology and Cybersecurity Risk Management Officer, and a Wall Street Chief Information Security Officer. Jennifer has authored numerous publications on information security management, information technology risk management, and a host of other technology-related privacy issues. She has a master's degree in computer science and philosophy and a PhD in systems engineering. She has created curriculum on numerous information security, cybersecurity, and technology risk topics for conferences, seminars, corporate training, and graduate level programs, and is an adjunct professor at Stevens Institute of Technology, QPAC University. Beside Jennifer, we have Kim Murray. I'm going to mispronounce your last name. Karras. Thank you, Karras. Kim serves as the Associate Director for the Masters of Science and Artificial Intelligence program at Northwestern University, McCormick School of Engineering. In her role, she is responsible for educational planning, business administration, and operational logistics. She's also responsible for leading the educational planning, business administration, for corporate engagement, outreach, and industry relations. Kim is also a graduate of Northwestern University and enjoys working with her students as they follow their path towards their personal and professional goals. And finally, Mr. John Rome. John is the Deputy CIO and has spent 20 plus years as an employee at Arizona State University. He is an experienced IT leader, educator, consultant, technologist, and innovator with a long history of working in higher education. Some of his special interests include student mentoring, learning science, and now voice enabling the world, the globe. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree with Clark University, Iowa, and an MBA from ASU. And he is also a 2-time recipient of the President's Award of Innovation. So I'd like to say welcome, and I'll turn the conversation over to our first guest, Jamie. Thank you.
All right. We have been given 8 minutes to talk, so I will do my best to tell a story succinctly. Okay. Oops, that was backwards. Okay. So, hi everybody, I'm Jamie Goldstein. I'm the Director of Strategic Projects and Innovation Grants at the Harvard Initiative for Learning and Teaching. And if you were to think of Harvard as being like a big ship, I sit in the middle of the university in the Office of the President and Provost as a steering wheel team thinking about where Harvard should be heading with teaching and learning at large. And specifically, I oversee a funding mechanism, a bucket of money, that we give out to people who have innovative ideas around teaching and learning. This fund has been around for about 8 years now. And it's been really successful with faculty and staff. New collaborations, new research, new ideas. But when I came onto the team 2 years ago from MIT, I looked around and said, hey, where are the students? Right? It seemed kind of odd to me that we were having this rich and dynamic conversation about education innovation, and there were like no students. They weren't applying for funding, and those who were applying, it was like very few people, and they weren't being very successful. And my team was like, I don't know, maybe they're not all that interested. And I said, I have a really hard time believing that that's true. So I spent my almost entire first year at Harvard hiring students to help me map the space. And this is really hard because if you don't know, Harvard has 12 or 13 different schools. They're geographically all over Boston. It is not an easy space to map. And first we coded and analyzed all the student groups across all of Harvard that had anything to do with teaching and learning to look at the patterns. And then we looked at all of the social innovation competitions across all of Harvard to see sort of a cross-section what was happening with the students who had ideas around education innovation, teaching and learning. And what we found was really surprising. What we found was that 97% of the students who were looking for resources for their ideas were just hearing no. They were getting rejected from their ideas. There were over $400,000 worth of social innovation funding available to students at Harvard, and very, very few of those students were getting these big dollar prizes, like $75K for the first prize and $25K for the second. It was a winner-take-all model, and everyone else was just hearing no. And you can imagine that that's probably not the message that we want to be sending to bright, talented, passionate people who want to do good for the world, right? So I convened leaders from across the university, from the business school, the ed school, the Kennedy School, the innovation labs, and I said, hey, what would it look like if we designed a really different model? One that had more yeses than nos in it, one that taught students about how to innovate firsthand and didn't just award those who were already being successful, and one where we gave as many people as possible the firsthand experience about what it takes to take an idea and translate it into action and then outcomes. So this past year, we launched for the first time what we now call, Operation Impact. And this is a university-wide initiative, so students from all levels across all schools can participate. And we give them funding, resources, and connections to really help them learn how to take an idea and scale it, go somewhere with it. And we really designed this based on the data that we collected. I won't sort of bore you with all the data, though. My colleagues back at home know that I do love data. A couple rules we put in place to sort of create the theory of action that we wanted in this whole thing, which was, one, you couldn't apply alone. You had to show us you had a cross-disciplinary or a cross-functional team, that you couldn't have already raised a lot of money for this idea, and we invested heavily in some fellows, some students who already had experience as being entrepreneurs in education. And we required that if you were going to access the funds, you had to meet with a fellow first. And we did that because we wanted a couple things. We wanted to make sure that no matter what, everybody got feedback on their ideas. Number two, that they got connected into this network of resources and joined the community. And three, we wanted to make sure that everyone heard, not yet, not now, right? So maybe you're not ready for funding yet, but go out, learn these through things, connect to these faculty, take these classes, come back next cycle, and let's see what you got, right? So wow, I would say at the beginning of the year we held a kickoff and so many students showed up. We really weren't sure if this thing would take off, but boy, were students hungry for this resource. In our first funding cycle, we had 32 teams apply for funding. Second, 52 teams. We hosted a pitch competition and had 67 teams apply for funding. Then 30 teams again for our next round of funding. And finally this summer we have 13 teams working with us on their ideas. Had a little bit of a bell curve, right? And it was about January where I realized, oh my goodness, we are running out of resources. There are more students here than we thought would come. This year we ended up funding 60 unique teams with their ideas, close to 200 individuals giving them firsthand experience with innovating in the field of education. And so I looked around and I was like, oh my gosh, they're blowing through their money, we're blowing through our money. What are they using this money for? And it was for web services. And that's when I reached out to AWS and I said, maybe we could partner here because they all need support. They all have ideas, whether they're working on programs or services or whatever, but they see technology as an important part of their scaling mechanism. And that's when they started partnering with us. So now we give them some funding and some credits and access to AWS Educate to help them learn how to use those credits effectively. And some teams are really taking off. I mean, we originally designed this with learning outcomes as our real measurement. How can we teach the most through this funding mechanism? But what we're seeing is that there are some teams, once you create the runway, they're really taking off. So here are 3 examples of projects that are coming out of this community this year that we think you ought to be watching. The first is called the Oklahoma Science Project. It is a group of PhD students in the STEM fields who, the founders from Oklahoma, where they pretty much cut STEM curriculum support. And she was upset about that and created a completely self-directed online curriculum so that even if students didn't have a teacher who had any computational skills, they could still learn self-directed on their own some of these skills. The next is New Teachers Thriving. This is a group of former teachers who were really upset at how many teachers were quitting after their first year and created a professional development program to really support teachers in their first year and make them sort of continue and retain in the field. We piloted in the Boston Public Schools and now have clients in multiple cities. The last is called Colorful, and it's a group of women of color who felt really upset as former teachers themselves that there wasn't enough culturally affirmative curriculum out there. And so they've created an Etsy platform of sorts to help teachers who are creating this stuff sort of give it to the community, sell it, and put some money back into the ecosystem for more professional development in this area. We're really excited that next year we have more resources. We've got a few corporate sponsors coming in. AWS is a great partner for us too, and here's what the year is going to look like. Next year we have a kickoff, we have a showcase at the end and a Hive pitch in the middle. We have 4 funding cycles. Last year they were only $500 each. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of money. This year we'll be able to give more funding to students. I mean, it didn't take a lot of money to get them to show up. Found the fellows were really a key piece of their success. Investing some funding in some teams in the middle of the year that are starting to gain traction. I do not yet have my 100K prize, so if you have that funding, boy, would I like to talk to you. And finally, we're partnering with an accelerator, an EdTech accelerator, to figure out the teams that are really going somewhere, how can we help them get into the ecosystem. I'm thrilled about what is growing and scaling at Harvard in our education innovation ecosystem and look forward to speaking with you more about it.
And now for something completely different.
Shaniqua. No worries. Yeah.
A cybersecurity professional. I have been for 30 years. I started at AT&T Bell Labs as an expert systems developer when the public switch phone network went out and they thought it was hackers and the rest.
They want you to check your mic. The mic. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Let's try again. I can project. I think they heard that. If my voice comes back, I'll stop projecting. So, let's do this. Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Mic 1.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Wow, there we go. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is my experience in academia here. After I was the chief information security officer for one of the Wall Street firms that crashed during the financial crisis, so I decided to just go back and do a little consulting and see what was out there, and I spent 5 years in academia and created a graduate program in system security engineering for Stevens Institute of Technology. And at the time, in the engineering school at Stevens, all programs were required to have an experience accelerator, which means a real-life lab or professional experience in that program so that the students could really feel like it was what it was like to be part of an organization that they would go to, after graduation. So our experience accelerator had to be some kind of cybersecurity lab. And at the time, all of the cybersecurity labs anyone had were these attack and defend labs. You set people up with hacks and you set people up with controls. And of course, the defenders always lose and the hackers run away with the prize. And it looks like that success in cybersecurity means knowing how to hack well. And we don't train people on how to defend. So the original part of my talk that our AWS Educate rep had put on here was, and somehow we lost our title slides, but that's fine, was education and cyber defense, right? So one of the things that we had to do is create a lab atmosphere so people could feel like they were working in a lab. And so I started work a good 6 months before the class was to be held, working with university services to figure out, how I was going to know who was in the class and creating methods of taking the roster and creating IDs for people in an online classroom that they could then use to launch or get instructions and assignments to go into a virtual machine that I had to configure for them to create different images for servers and virtual desktops that they just used RDP to get into from their own laptops. And then in order to actually run the cyber scenario, which was an event that happened to a company where different students had different roles and responsibilities in the company, and I used a tool that they use for scenario building in the critical infrastructure protection, the financial services critical infrastructure protection exercises, where they stage an event in various activities and put it up on a web server so that people are looking at something that looks like a screen in an operations center and reacting to it. And different students then would get different emails from a pre-set database of logs and alerts for that particular event on how the systems were impacted by the event. There were no real systems being impacted. It was all on their screen. I did get at one point one of the virtual desktops to experience a virus, but only because I had to write it, because every time I tried to actually put a real virus on the desktop, the antivirus programs killed it, and I couldn't find one that hadn't been recognized yet. But so, I mean, I was very constrained working within this infrastructure in a virtual machine with images that were created and had to be modified for this program. And literally, it took 6 months to get one lab off the ground. So after all that, when the students had finished their labs, they would get assignments from me on asking what the experience was and how they reacted to it and what their recommendations were for assessment and continuing controls. And then they would give me lab reports, and I would then pass on the grade back to the online classroom that went back to the university services. So it was incorporating a bit of the cloud, but as time went on, Educate services became more accessible, and so now I'll just fast forward to what it looks like in 2019. We have, and this now is at Quinnipiac University, who didn't have anything, so I had a green slate in 2019. Their registrar online classrooms already had single sign-on and student storage, so I could rely on a single sign-on system. They already had a classroom portal by classroom, so I could put a lab access portal in the classroom, and I could give them access directly to the lab services and custom software. Then I could create a lab administration interface that automatically takes the rosters, because they do this already for so many other services like Mirror and Blackboard. So I could create that interface and know who was taking which class without having to do it myself. Using their single sign-on, have virtual machine images that accept it, and have virtual desktops with controlled images that I could give them some administrative capability on. And then we have a host now of cloud-based security tools, software that's available in the cloud, things like scanners and analyzers for security incidents. And there are so many cloud-based services now, and a lot of these security vendors are volunteering to allow my cloud to use their cloud for free, as long as it's for educational purposes. And I can add lots of different services very quickly. So the first class that I did in 2019 for Quinnipiac took me 3 weeks to prepare. And that's the punchline of that story. Of course, Amazon's been very helpful in providing the AWS Educate backend for a lot of the virtual machines. And I got done in under 8 minutes, so somebody else can have my time. Thanks.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. So I'm going to do something very different. I'm the world's clumsiest person, and that's very close to me, so I'm going to do my presentation from right here where it's safe. So I am Kim Karras, and I'm going to advance to where I am. It's very interesting. So Northwestern University, I work for the engineering school, the McCormick School of Engineering, and we were the first to go to market with a focused, dedicated artificial intelligence master's program. It was born from a very mature computer science master's degree, I know that's what you have already, and we found that a lot of students that had interest in CS, they were adding that they wanted a specialization in artificial intelligence or machine learning. So our senior academic leadership decided this is what we're going to do to respond to the demand, respond to what the market is in need of. I am going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and machine learning. A lot of you may know a lot more about it than I, but if there's one person in the audience that I reach, I'm super happy. So what is artificial intelligence? Obviously, we know that it's machines that mimic or model human behavior. So a lot of the things that I heard about as I sat and watched the student presentation where students talked about Alexa and Siri and Google Assistant and things of that nature that actually do mimic the behavior of people. I know many of you may have seen the viral video of the person that was calling for the haircut. And it even had the same inflections of the mm-hmm and the yes that we normally hear when we talk to people on the phone. So it's not going to kill us, as we know, but a lot of ways it's going to make us a lot more efficient. Machine learning, obviously, which is a subset of artificial intelligence, where you're actually enabling the machines to learn more and do better over time. Things like, if you've been watching Jeopardy and you know Ken Jennings was the person with the longest standing record who went up against Watson and lost, of course, but obviously that's a really great example of machine learning and how it starts to learn over time and get better. Navigation apps, I was walking through Washington Memorial and I was using my navigation app to get me here. So the cool things that machine learning is doing for us, and these are the things that our students are actually focusing on. And then obviously the deep learning. We had a hackathon where AWS came out, we hosted them, and I'll talk a little bit more about the RoboCar rally. If you were downstairs with the vendors, you may have seen the Deep Racer and the RoboCar track that's downstairs is pretty cool. So it's a lot of what the students are actually taking part in. If you've been online and you've done chatting with customer service because you had a problem, many times you're not talking to a person, it's a chatbot. I just bought a Roomba from iRobot, and I was chatting with the customer service person, and me being in the artificial intelligence, I wasn't talking to a real person. So it's really quite cool that chatbots are kind of taking over customer service. And then if you're looking at larger scales of machine learning and deep learning, you're looking at self-driven cars. And I know that a lot of us right now are saying, no, I won't get into it until another 15 years or so. But that's another way that we're getting involved with larger scale when it comes to self-driven. So this is just really a quick overview of what our curriculum looks like. And we're a 2-year-old program. We're going into our 2nd year. And our students aren't just computer science people. They're actually designers and they're architects of AI solutions. So what happens is when they start in the program, they come in and they learn the foundation. They learn about what artificial intelligence is, and then the supporting technologies like the machine learning, like the deep learning. They go on to the expansion of what they're learning, and they get into the NLP. They get into the computer vision, the human-computer interaction. They move on and do their practicum work where they start working with projects, real-world problems, real-world people, real-world examples, and they're able to marry that into the theory that they're actually learning. And then they go into the software area where they're learning more the agile and the development and such. So all in all, our students are really preparing themselves. And when I reached out to AWS, because we started to partner, because it's not just about learning about AI, but it's also the supporting technologies like what AWS offers. As an example, for their platform for machine learning and Internet of Things, we were able to host this fantastic day-long hackathon where students were able to get their robocars, and they were able to build them and train them and calibrate them and race them based on using the platform for AWS. And that's what made us really excited, because it's not just about, again, the learning about artificial intelligence, but it's how to use it and how to go and work with real people and real data to be able to move from the classroom into the working world of being a professional. So you can kind of see some of the students, and they're kind of working on the throttle as far as the thrust and how fast it's going, but it was really a fantastic day. You can see in the far corner, the students are really collaborating. We have 3 students from artificial intelligence that are at the bottom, a robotics student that's in the middle, and then a electrical engineering that's at the top. So students are really collaborating because they're taking such interest in this platform from AWS that they were introduced to. So it's quite refreshing to see that they're really taking part of that. So moving on to where we are from here, what's special about the AI program at Northwestern is it's not just, again, about what can I learn to do with AI. It's about partnering with platform companies. It's looking beyond the science, which is where we are, and it's moving to the practice, which is where our partners are. We have a number of partners. All of our students are interned out for the summer. Right now, they're finishing up their practicums. But you know, again, AWS was generous enough to come out and spend time with us. So students are able to look at the technological solutions for the technology that will support the solutions that they want to add to try to help companies. So that's our AI program, and we're super excited. And I finished in under 8 minutes, so thank you.
All right.
John, I'm sorry, before you hop into your
Okay.
program, quick follow-up question. I'm just curious. Kim, could you tell us how large your program is? You indicated it's two years old, but how many students are in your program?
I love that. Thank you for asking.
Of course.
So we are a brand new program. We're still in our very first cohort year. We just accepted our second batch of students. We have 19. And what we're doing is we're growing incrementally. So we started out, we wanted really 12, but the talent just looked so fantastic. So we admitted 19. Well, actually, we admitted 20 and 19 matriculated. We have 25 on tap right now that'll start in September. And then the subsequent year, we'll go up to 40.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Great.
asking.
Congrats. Hi, everyone. Well, I have an obligatory slide that I need to go over first, to remind everyone we're the number one in innovation 4 years in a row. And if you don't have this slide, they take away your library card. They do that. And Jamie, I was wondering if you could help me name that list there. Would you help read that list for me? Well, there's a school that begins with H there. I'm sorry. I'll go on to the next slide. For our international attendees and those who are geographically challenged, this is where you can find ASU. We're in the state of Arizona. And a little bit about ASU, one university, many places, a great place. I really like the fact that we're an inclusive organization, or inclusive university. Also very large, 112,000 students, 40,000 online, and one of the best numbers I'm most proud of is we have 86% retention, moving that from 73%. So we must be doing something right there about students and who we are as an institution. Also, some notable collaborations from the recent years. Some of our online students are Starbucks employees, as well as Uber, and I'm happy to announce we just opened up a cloud innovation center around smart cities, powered by AWS, in November, so I'm really proud about that as well. We also, as I said, in many places, we also have an 8-story building not too far from here, so we're everywhere, we're taking over. And this is a school where we have several institutes, as well as our Cronkite School of Journalism just right down the street. So when I think about the technology disruptors in my lifetime, or at least in my professional lifetime, I think about the day when I first saw Macintosh and the graphical user interface. Some of you are nodding your head. Major impact in my life. And then I think about 1995, watching Netscape go public and watching the World Wide Web, the next major technology disruptor. And then fast forward to 2007 when the mobile phone came around. That was a major technology disruptor. And then today, I think the next major technology disruptor is going to be voice. And I think we were a little bit lucky at ASU. We could see around the corner a little bit and decided we wanted to become a voice-enabled campus. So we decided to enlist someone to help us with that. And of course, we looked to our friend Alexa here to help us with that, being a voice-enabled campus. And so in the fall of 2017, we introduced 1,500 Echo Dots into a brand new residence hall for our engineering freshman students. And as you can see, a lot of great press around that. A few photos of the students who opted in to get those free Echo Dots. And I think every one of them took one of those dots. And so you can see a lot of excitement around that. At the same time, we introduced an official skill. And when you think about your mobile phone, you have apps on it. When you have an Alexa or an Echo device, you have a skill. So we created the official ASU skill that allowed students to ask questions about the university. And this was a communal skill at the time. And so the students could ask questions like, when are the finals? How late is the Hayden Library open? As well as tell me about events. And we actually tied into some of our databases or APIs where it was automatic. So we went out to Google Streets or Google Maps and took over buildings and put in hours of operations there. So we kept the corpus of data behind Alexa pretty automated in that process. And so, and to this day, still pretty heavy usage. We knew that students would primarily use it for listening to music, set timers so they don't fall asleep and they're up for classes, but we still get probably 2,000 unique hits or uses a month from this skill. So clearly, without a whole lot of with advertisements, that's really a great story. Also wanted to share with you, this is one of our students in that residence hall. So 4 days after he got his Alexa, he decided to build an official skill himself, published to the store. He took a Google Calendar and decided to put all of the activities of the residence halls. So now the students could ask Alexa what was happening that night, and they could find out what was happening. And I'm glad to say that now he's one of my staff. So we saw a lot of talent there and that. Also, in addition, when we did roll them out, we decided to introduce them to the curriculum as well. So Dr. Chen was one of the several faculty members, in programming courses or other courses where they introduced, say, a week of skill building, or also, or when they made it where Alexa could voice enable a robot. And as you can see, this is one of the robots they enabled. And in fact, I shot a little video to show you one of those classes in action. Oh no.
Alexa.
Let me go back. It's worth playing again.
Tell RoboBlue forward.
Sending the robot command.
Alexa. Tell RoboBlue right.
Sending the robot command.
Alexa. Tell RoboBlue to pee.
Sending the robot command.
Now, isn't that why you love students? It's great. So after the fall program, everyone said, okay, John, what are we going to do next to try to top that? So last year, we decided to use Alexa or voice as a recruitment tool. So we decided to create a program called the AI Scholars. And what we did with those, we decided to, for out-of-state students who had applied to ASU and who had not yet committed anywhere, we actually decided to say, come to ASU and we'll give you a free Echo Dot. And that's not a value proposition there. But we also gave them a Willy Wonka golden ticket, where 10 of them, if they won a hackathon, they would actually receive $5,000 in scholarships, as well as a free trip to Amazon headquarters to meet Jeff Bezos. I lied about the Jeff Bezos part, but it was enough to... and here's the letter right there, thanks to AWS Educate. It was co-branded. But I was thinking maybe 60 students would sign up. Actually, 700 students signed up for the program. And you could see us last fall handing out the Echo Dots. And we had a bunch of training programs during that time to teach them about skill building and that. And as you can see, a lot of happy students receiving Echo Dots to become AI scholars. And these were where the AI scholars came from. So very diverse geographically in the US where those students came from. And here is, so of the 700 students, we had over 100 who actually participated in the hackathon. And those are the students right there. And if you notice what they're doing right there, you see they're all holding their hands a certain way. They're actually doing this right here. So before I move to the next slide, I want everyone in the audience to do this, or I won't go to the next slide. So this is one of our logos, is the Triton. So our students do that. So that's why they do that. So it was really a great weekend. It was an exhausting 20 or 48 hours, but you can see that here are the students in action of building out the skills. They decided to use the IoT devices. They turned water on and off. They connected to our LMS API. So really a lot of great ideas out there. And we ended up with 10 winners. And here's a picture of some of those winners with Teresa and our mascot Sparky. So it was fun to have her, and she's now an official Sun Devil with her jersey. We also ended up taking up to Seattle to see the Spheres and the Ghost Store. So really, it was a great trip, and really for these freshmen, really opened up their world to think about. Now, I think that voice is going to be there's going to be a new market for voice development, just like web development in the future. So a lot of excitement around that program. So now me being asked what's next, and I think what we're going to be looking at next is really how we're going to create a personalized skill. And so next fall, we're going to enable our portal where students can ask, when's my next class? What did I get my last assignment? So that's next. And before I start, I'm going to ask Alexa one more question. Alexa, who is #1 in innovation?
Arizona State University is. Duh. How else do you think I'd be able to answer your questions?
Okay.
Show off. Thank you so much for all of you providing that overview. John, I didn't realize how competitive you were.
I know.
Yeah.
This is a new side of you.
I never trash talk on the panel, but I'm ready to start.
Let's go outside.
So what I love is that what we've heard from each of you are very different, unique approaches to innovation. And one of the things that we hear all the time as we work with institutions all over the world is really how in the world can we stay in step with innovation? We've heard from each of you around cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, voice-enabled, and even entrepreneurship. And so I'm curious if you could share with us, how do you all stay lockstep with what's happening in the space of innovation? And more importantly, how do you help your curriculum stay fresh and relevant to really reflect where the world is going as you look around the corner? Please.
Got a pretty good answer for that. I've been, as I said, in various, as I was introduced, in various roles in financial industry, cybersecurity management, but in this, but now I'm a full-time consultant. And one of the things that I did is I took the software that I use. Every consultant has their own little bag of tricks, right? And they have it on their laptop. I used to have like a bunch of Microsoft Access databases to do assessments with. Everybody in cybersecurity knows what I'm talking about. And spreadsheets are ubiquitous for doing any kind of thing from project management. And what I did was I just took all of those tools, put them in the Amazon cloud, and started just writing Java programs and using web services and the tools and techniques that are available in the cloud to do my own consulting. So I ended up with a server to support and employees and a project, and now I have a thing of a very small software company with just my own security consulting tools on it. But that experience of having to use the cloud and having to do all that configuration and having to have a backup and having to have the security groups and having, every time you put up an EC2, if you don't put it in a security group immediately, you will see your logs start to fill up with hackers. So it is just using it myself is the way to figure out how you can use the tools to actually create that aha moment in students.
Yeah, please.
So I don't know if I need that. So for the AI program, it's really important for us to continue the conversations with not only the industry companies that we work with, but also the platform companies that we work with. Because as I had mentioned earlier, they lead the practice in innovation, the companies and the platform. Then we lead the science, of course. And it's important for us to keep those conversations going. We have 3 experiential learning components to our curriculum where students are actually doing preparatory work. They're doing a practicum project where they're working with companies on industry-led projects where they have a technical advisor on the industry side. They have their internship, and then they come back and do a final capstone project. So throughout the 15-month curriculum, students are really thrown into the applied learning approach to where those conversations lead to additional innovation. We have a lot of entrepreneurs on our, as a part of our student cohort. So those conversations are really important, and it's really important to look up from the computer screen, look up from the books to be able to follow what the world is telling us. We use a whole brain philosophy where it's not just the developer side that's doing the programming in the Java, Python, Raspberry Pi, but it's also the people and the needs and doing what society is asking us. You know, law and ethics comes a lot in talks of AI, law and ethics. So it's just really following where we need to be and how to direct that innovation based on what we're learning from industry partners and from our platform partners like AWS.
Yeah, excellent. To piggyback on that particular point, Kim, and open it up to all of you, one of the things that we understand and recognize with institutions as they attempt to try to stay in lockstep with innovation is really trying to make sure that everything that they do actually takes root in students and pivots and translates from the classroom and actually into their professional pursuits. As you reflect on the work that each of your institutions have engaged with around innovation, how are you seeing the mindsets and the practices translate in your students as they leave your institutions?
I mean, I can add here, but I think I'll change that a little bit. When I think about innovation, we're lucky that we use students as part of that innovation agenda. And I think we have a culture of innovation. I can speak primarily for our central IT organization, but we have 550 staff in our central IT. We have 280 students. And so it's a very inexpensive group that can actually, if I do have an idea, I can use them to actually do that. And so one great example recently, students complain about one thing, Wi-Fi. And so we decided to capture all the tweets that had the word ASU and Wi-Fi And we were able to then send that to a Slack channel in our 24-hour call center. And so any student that was complaining actually got a tweet back saying, I'm sorry that you're having problems, why don't you call that? But and I think that's where, this is a little bit of plug for AWS as well. We use AWS as that innovation platform as well. We couldn't have moved as fast as we have without that in the place. And it's actually my favorite reading of the week too, A lot of F-bombs are dropped, and my favorite recently were, I hate ASU Wi-Fi so much I want to kill a Care Bear. But I mean, that's what, students are brutal when it comes to Wi-Fi, so that's part of it. But I think that's what we've done. We've used students as part of that. And then we're noticing that especially in the high demand areas around development, cloud, and analytics, all of our students are employable when they leave. There's never any type of, we try to hire them first, and if not, they typically are employed.
I have a thought about your first question that ties into your second question. I don't think actually we're trying to keep up with the trends. I think that we designed our program with a real constructivist perspective, which is that students are intrinsically motivated to solve the problems that they care about. And if we create the right structures and systems and resources around them, then that's what's going to help them, that's what innovation is. And so all of the ideas that we see coming from students come from their own experiences. They come from things that they experience as pain points, and they're sort of leveraging the research at Harvard, the connections, the credits, the everything to solve those. And so there's nothing more current than that, right? They're solving problems that they find to be really critical and important to address for education globally. And we're still really new as a program, but we are assessing very closely along the way sort of what they're learning from the experience and sort of getting a better sense of what are the outcome measurements that aren't just market shares, which is how a lot of innovation ecosystems sort of look at, are we successful, what companies are coming out of our university, how are they doing in the market. Sort of trying to figure out how can we find other metrics beyond those that sort of say what are they learning from this experience that will help them when they leave here be agents of change, whether they're entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs. What are the skills they're gaining from this hands-on experience?
And I'm curious, as a follow-up question, what are some of those skills that have surfaced as a result of some of that research?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Prior to us launching this, so many of the ideas that were education innovation ideas were very theoretical. And what we wanted to do was help them actually put rubber to road a lot sooner. And so one of the number one things that they're learning is about user design and user feedback, is about going out and talking to people and incorporating data and that sort of quick, rapid iteration process into their sort of innovation cycle. It's something that isn't taught as frequently in the field of education as it is in other sectors. And so helping people really understand, how do you quantify impact? What data measurements should I be looking at? How do I take feedback from kindergartners or from parents or from school and superintendents and sort of incorporate that in my sort of innovation cycle?
Excellent.
I can
Please.
add on to that a little bit. In systems engineering especially, and also in cybersecurity in general, we know that we're not going to be teaching people the tools and techniques of today. They're going to go into some job and start to learn those tools and techniques in much greater detail than they learn in our labs. We're teaching them how to think at the systems level, how to approach problems, how to understand there's people, process, and technology, and you cannot isolate each of those. So we're really teaching them how to be a problem solver as opposed to how to solve this problem.
Yeah, excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Something that comes to mind, and we hear oftentimes when we talk to different institutions, is this notion of where to begin. If we want to stand up or replicate similar kinds of work, where would we get started? What are some of the blockers or considerations or barriers if you were to give advice to an institution in terms of trying to stand up similar work? Where would you tell them to get started?
Well, the first thing that where we got started is we have fantastic researchers that are homegrown, that are right in Northwestern, whether they finished their doctorate degree from Northwestern or ASU or from wherever. But we have a course that we call Frameworks for Artificial Intelligence, and that Frameworks is to share with students their own research and what they're looking at, what they're planning to do with it, the things that they've created, use cases, any proofs of concept that they've come up with, and that is kind of where we started. My faculty director that I work with, he's a chief scientist and co-founder of Narrative Science, which is a natural language company. And he was tapped to actually start this program because not only is he an educator, he's also a practitioner that has just a deep breadth of experience, and from there he has the network within the academic community as well as in the corporate community to be able to bring together these thought leaders to come up with what should our curriculum look like. So we have an advisory board. We have an advisory board that half are educators and then the other half are people that are, AI evangelists and other folks that are in the industry, and together they decided what industry needed, what students needed to learn, and how to go about that. And we were born in our first cohort in 2018.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I think what you should do if you see good ideas out there, you should just steal them and then put your twist on how your institution would do it. I think that's a really great way to do it. When I think about, we now have the Cloud Innovation Center at ASU. We saw that Cal Poly had one, primarily around students and security, and we said, hey, that's really a great idea. We want one of those, and we're going to put our twist. We're going to make it around smart cities. And so I think, it's a good idea to steal sometimes.
I think that's the definition of innovation.
Yeah, why not?
I would say that I was surprised at, there was so much interest and excitement coming from the students, and we were giving them so little money. Up to $500. Some people got $200, $300. It was not a lot of money, right? But them winning something and us giving them the endorsement that you have an idea and it's worth pursuing, that actually was probably worth enough for them. The money was an extra thing to give them just enough money to get started, but just saying you have an idea that's worth exploring from someone that's not them was really powerful.
Yeah. John, I'm going to pivot back to you because what I heard from Jamie and Kim's remarks are students, critical, the industry partner, absolutely critical, innovation, being able to look around at others and build upon their good work. But I'm curious, ASU is the #1 innovative school in the U.S.
How many years in a row?
I think 4.
Okay, thanks.
Was it 4?
What universities are you in front of? Sorry.
You all have done something at scale as an institution, and I think that is something, as we think about giving advice to institutions, when you think about scale, what are some of the other considerations that an institution has to think about in terms of gaining the buy-in, the risks associated with doing something at that scale?
Yeah, no, that's a really hard question. And I think it starts from the top. Our leadership believes that this is a way that we differentiate. We need to scale. If we're trying to teach the masses at the level that and be an inclusive institution, we need to be able to be innovative in our delivery of courses. And it's hard to say. There's just sort of this just sort of a DNA at ASU around innovation, and we actually use a lot of the AWS principles around fail fast, think big, and not even aware that we've done that. And so I think that's really what that DNA is part of everyone that's there, and it just continues to grow and grow. And so, and then we get opportunities to tell our story here, and so that also lets people know, and that brings in partnerships and it brings students here. They're very interested in what's happening down in the Southwest. We're no longer the sleepy regional university anymore. We're a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah. I'm going to turn it over to the audience, but close out with one thought as we pivot. If there are questions, please, I don't know if we have a runner, but if you have questions, please don't hesitate to come to the runner. There's an interesting statistic that I recently read that surveyed the incoming freshman class for the U.S. across state institutions. And there was the statistics indicated that 85% of incoming freshman students at state institutions, the main reason that they were pursuing a college degree, and this is 2-year or 4-year students, was to get a job. Now you're probably thinking, well, duh, of course that's what they were doing. But what's shocking about this particular statistic is that was a nearly 20% jump from the same survey 3 years prior. So I think it's really fascinating to see that even students are now also driving and pushing institutions around this notion of innovation, because students recognize that their engagement with an institution, it necessitates for them to get the support and the engagement around the skills that are transferring back into the workforce. And so I think that's a statistic that stood out to me as I think about the work and think about this notion of innovation. Please.
So, quick question for John. As a practical matter, Broward County Libraries, we're about to roll out full Echo Dots on every single service point. So, a couple hundred throughout a county system. How many people did you have on your team, and how long did it take you to spin that up?
So the great thing is that we had a lot of student workers, and so that really helps when you have that many students. Also, we decided to be very intentional. We've actually created a voice ML AI team, and right now the team is primarily 3 full-time equivalents. They're all recent grads, and the idea is that we just hired our first ML person. So the idea is to bring this team together, starting with voice, because it's a very, very low risk, and then what the idea is then we try to grow this team out into a larger AI ML team, and we've decided to take voice within that. So that's really what our plan is, quite intentional. We didn't want to be back. Remember the days when the cell phones came out and the mobile apps? The web developers then went and tried to create mobile apps, and all you're doing were pinching, and we decided, no, we needed to go first, and we needed to be voice first, think about the developers. And then we're also very intentional too of just not having technicians. We decided that a lot of the students were multidisciplinary and who had English skills, who were writers, who could really help us as well, and also QA. So we decided very intentionally as well not to just have technicians working on the skills, and then work closely with the user community.
Thank you, John. Other questions? We've got 2 minutes, I believe, left in our session. Yes, please, right up front. Thank you.
How's it going? I think, in my opinion, like education is very student-focused, but also very educator-focused. So I was just wondering what your institutions are doing more towards the educators themselves and how they impact the students, rather than all the strategic projects you're doing targeted only towards students.
Great question.
I can volunteer for project, but I can volunteer that they are I see the programs that have lab systems, especially cloud lab services and systems, going out and getting adjuncts much sooner. In the old days, the people who created the program would be very careful about how they wanted it run before they would allow an adjunct to teach a course. And with these innovative classes, it's the opposite. I was the first professor to teach my cybersecurity systems engineering course at Stevens, and I'll be the first for every class that I teach at Quinnipiac, so that I can bring in the knowledge and turn it over to the faculty. So I'm seeing a lot more of that.
As I had mentioned earlier, our faculty are PhD faculty in computer science, ML engineers, AI focused. So the fact that they're already doing research in their own particular area made it a really smooth transition in order to have the fully educated staff within these specialty areas. We have one gentleman, he's a PhD, his focus in machine learning and AI is in voice and audio and music. So we have a lot of different focus areas that kind of help because our professors are already focusing and practicing in that area, so it makes it easier to kind of trickle down to the curriculum and then trickle down to the students as well.
And if we're talking about cloud too, I mean, another plug for AWS Educate, it allows us, you know, an AWS Academy allows I teach a big data course in our W.P. Carey School of Business, and students can get $200 of free cloud credit a year, and I think also faculty can take advantage of that as well. So I think that's just another vehicle that they can use, but you know, faculty being faculty, sometimes they don't want to change.
True.
And on that note, thank you so much, John, Kim, Jennifer, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you, John.